Out of a small island nation came a man driven by ruthless ambition. At his zenith, he would rule over 70 million people and transform the face of Europe. Warrior, emperor, despot, he rode the tiger of revolution to become one of the most admired and reviled men in history, Napoleon Bonaparte. Born in August 1769, Napoleon was the second of 8 surviving children. As a child, he is shy, moody, and soft-spoken. Still, his parents have high hopes for their young son. In 1799, at age 10, he's enrolled in the French military school at Brienne. There, his schoolmates mock and make fun of his small size and thick Italian accent, a memory that will haunt Napoleon and shape his character in the years to come. Still, he shows a talent for leadership and for organizing war games. At 15, Napoleon transfers to France's most prestigious military academy, the École Militaire in Paris. A year later, he graduates 42nd in a class of 56. Napoleon is commissioned a second lieutenant in the artillery in September 1785. For an ambitious man, the choice is fortuitous. New advances in weaponry and tactics are about to rewrite history. He plans to use his skill to drive the French out of his native Corsica until a much larger drama overtakes him. The first wave of revolution sweeps through France, and one of the great debates of the age, monarchy versus democracy. On one side sit a privileged few, living in the lap of luxury as they have for centuries. Noblemen and aristocrats are indifferent to the suffering of thousands of their countrymen who've died of poverty and starvation. On the other side, philosophers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau are spreading radical new ideas about human rights and rallying around the cry, liberty, equality, fraternity. On August 10, 1792, anger in the streets boils over. A mob invades King Louis XVI's palace. With them march sections of the Paris National Guard. From the beginning, it is obvious blood will flow, and Napoleon is there to witness it. Louis and his wife, Marie Antoinette, are dragged away to prison. The despised monarchy has come to an end. In 1793, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette are marched to the guillotine. Their deaths unleash a tidal wave of blood. Over the next year, during the Reign of Terror, 250,000 people will be slaughtered. The killing triggers the new republic's first crisis, civil war. Thousands of officers resign their commissions. Seizing the opportunity for advancement, Napoleon pleads for loyalty to the government and the revolution.
Fraternité, égalité, liberté, être toujours le meilleur.
His allegiance will not go unnoticed. By the summer of 1793, France is at war with itself and most of Europe. For months, the government has been trying to eject French royalists and 18,000 combined Spanish and British troops from the great naval arsenal at Toulon. Napoleon is in command of the artillery.
Nous sommes ici. Oui. Contre l'ennemi, les Anglais, ici. Oui.
But his superiors are skeptical when he maps out an unorthodox plan to lay siege to the harbor instead of the town. 48 hours later, to save their ships, the British withdraw. The victory earns Napoleon the rank of Brigadier General. He is now 24 years old, with time on his hands. He will not be summoned again until October 1795, when 30,000 royalists, fed up with the new regime, stage a coup. Forewarned of the attempt, Napoleon has ample time to conjure up a surprise for the rebels. As they surge forward, he rakes them with what he calls a whiff of grape shot, clusters of small iron balls fired at point-blank range. For the smug young general from Corsica, his shocking performance this day is only the beginning. By the age of 26, Napoleon Bonaparte has ridden the tide of revolution to the pinnacle of success. Now his destiny is about to take another turn. Legend has it that one day a young boy came to plead for the sword of his father, an aristocrat who'd gone to the guillotine during the Reign of Terror. With him was his mother, Josephine de Beauharnais. More likely, Napoleon met Josephine through a fellow officer, one of Josephine's many lovers. Whatever the circumstances, Napoleon is completely smitten. Passionate and worldly, Josephine dazzles him with her elegance and charm. Against the advice of her lawyer, who thinks Napoleon has nothing to offer but his cape and sword, she agrees to marry him. France is surrounded by enemies. Afraid the spirit of revolution will spread, Britain is spoiling for a fight. In Italy, France is already at war with Austria, who is allied with Russia. By April 1797, Napoleon has driven the Austrians back to within 75 miles of Vienna and secured an armistice. The peace treaty he negotiates will give France control of thousands of miles of territory from Belgium to Greece. Napoleon has defeated an empire and changed the map of Europe. Napoleon's old allies, including his brother Lucien, stage a coup. Backed by Napoleon's troops, they seize control of the government without firing a shot. Within a month, the ideals of the French Revolution will be swept away, and the leadership of France will fall on the shoulders of one man. In February 1800, the dictatorship of Napoleon begins. After years of war and regimes riddled with corruption and incompetence, Napoleon's first task is to restore order. He streamlines the government, turning it into an efficient military machine. He straightens out the country's finances by creating the National Bank of France. He simplifies the legal system with a new set of civil laws. The Code Napoleon regulates virtually every aspect of life. Though not a believer, he reopens the churches, banned during the Revolution. In 1802, a grateful nation appoints him head of state for life. A vote is taken to replace the Republic with an empire modeled after Charlemagne's 1,000 years earlier. Now Napoleon is only a step away from a throne. On December 2nd, 1804, at the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, the coronation is held. Dressed in the sumptuous cloak of royalty, Napoleon has brought Pope Pius VII from Rome to preside. But at the crucial moment, Napoleon astounds the Pope by taking the crown out of his hands and placing it on his own head. Then the Emperor of France makes Josephine his empress. The self-styled Roman emperor is master of all France. By age 40, Napoleon Bonaparte's empire has reached its zenith. He controls the destiny of 70 million people by force of will and personality. But without an heir, the empire is doomed. His marriage to Josephine has spawned countless rumors of infidelity, but no offspring. After a terrible fall from a balcony years earlier, she's unable to bear children. In April 1810, Napoleon marries Marie-Louise, the pretty 18-year-old daughter of his former enemy, the Emperor of Austria. Within a year, she gives birth to a son. Overjoyed, his father dubs him the King of Rome. His birthright will be a capital worthy of an empire. Paris, Napoleon decrees, will be something fabulous and unprecedented. He commissions 3 new bridges over the Seine and 2 new monuments. The Arc du Carrousel commemorates the heroic achievements of his Grande Armée. But while Paris glitters, Napoleon's own luster is fading. In a series of paintings, Francisco Goya documents the horrors of French occupation in Spain. In Paris, discontent is also growing. Feeding Napoleon's ambitions has cost France untold millions and an appalling number of lives. Now, many believe the price is too high. After several assassination attempts, the pressure is mounting. For Napoleon, winning becomes an obsession. When he plays chess with his friends, he cheats. Convinced he's infallible, he'll soon make one of the biggest mistakes of his life. On June 23, 1812, Napoleon leads the largest army ever assembled in Europe across the Niemen River into Russia. 70 miles from Moscow, near the village of Borodino, the Russian army digs in and waits. At dawn on September 7th, 130,000 French troops smash into the Russians. Finally, exhausted, the Russians withdraw. Napoleon has lost 30,000 men and 10 generals. His chief surgeon performs 200 amputations in 24 hours. The price was high, but the road to Moscow is open. When Napoleon arrives, he finds the city deserted. The next day, fire breaks out. Two-thirds of Moscow is destroyed by arsonists. For 5 weeks, Napoleon waits for the Tsar to surrender. But Alexander has a cunning scheme of his own. The Russian winter is closing in. His food supplies dwindling, Napoleon bitterly orders the long march home. Now the Russians launch their cruelest attack. They hound the French, forcing them back down the road to Borodino, past the bloated corpses of their comrades. Temperatures plummet to nearly zero. Food runs out. Stragglers freeze and die, while Napoleon rides comfortably in his carriage, eating 3 meals a day. For the French, the campaign becomes a race to the Berezina River, which means Poland and safety. But the Russians get there first. Napoleon will go home, the architect of one of the worst disasters in military history. His once grand army is in ruins. His empire is crumbling. His old enemies declare war. Soon the Allied forces of 5 nations will march into Paris. Napoleon's fate is sealed. Life is unbearable for me, he tells a comrade. In his darkest hour, he contemplates suicide and asks his doctor to concoct a poison. The poison is strong enough to kill 2 men. But his body rejects it. Napoleon had wanted to leave life. Now instead, he must leave France. Napoleon conquered Europe and for nearly 2 decades ruled it with an iron fist. Now his enemies will accept nothing less than unconditional surrender. On April 6, 1814, a humiliated emperor abdicates. 2 weeks later, Napoleon leaves Fontainebleau for the last time. 600 loyal troops and 4 cannons will follow him into exile. He is bound for Elba, a small island in the Mediterranean not far from his native Corsica. There he will be mocked as emperor and sovereign. Napoleon's departure signaled a return to monarchy and the dark days before the Revolution. With the stroke of a pen, Louis XVIII restores France to its former borders and abolishes the empire. But for some, there's no turning back. After 10 months on a 38-square-mile island of scrub-covered mountains, Napoleon is getting bored. By early 1815, word reaches him that much of France, including the military, would cheer his return. Though it's a long shot, Napoleon can't resist the opportunity to recover his old glory. In March, he escapes from Elba aboard a boat disguised as an English brig and makes a dash for Paris. Along the way, every regiment sent by the king to arrest him joins him. When the news reaches the palace, Louis flees. Now the people openly embrace their former emperor. Napoleon promises to save France, to roll back the calendar to the days of the Revolution, to restore liberty, equality, and fraternity. Meanwhile, in Vienna, Napoleon's enemies have been busy carving up his empire. When news of Napoleon's return reaches them, they officially declare him an outlaw. Immediately, the Duke of Wellington heads for Belgium to join up with Field Marshal Gebhard Blücher and the Prussians. Although they outnumber Napoleon almost 2-1, Wellington is too smart to underestimate his opponent. Having Boney in command is worth 40,000 men, he remarks. On the 18th, the French and the British face each other along a 3-mile ridge. At 11:30 a.m., gunfire signals the beginning of the Battle of Waterloo. 2 hours later, Napoleon launches the main attack. But his men line up in an outdated formation that presents Wellington with a perfect target. The British form into 20 squares interspersed with cannons. For the next 2 hours, waves of French cavalry break and die on the British lines. When the first group of Prussians arrives late in the afternoon, they attack Napoleon's right flank with fury. Still, the French fight bravely on, even breaking through Wellington's line before they're repulsed. Then a second group of Prussians appears out of nowhere. As if on cue, Wellington charges down the hill to meet them. Stunned and terrified, Napoleon's army collapses. It cost Wellington 20,000 men to win the Battle of Waterloo. It cost Napoleon twice as many to lose it. A month later, he surrendered to the British Navy for his second and final journey into exile. To prevent another escape, the emperor is taken to St. Helena, an island in the Atlantic 1,000 miles away and 1,000 miles from nowhere. In the spring of his 6th year on St. Helena, his health deserts him. Racked by razor-sharp pains in his stomach, he dictates his last will and testament. In it, he expresses his wish to be buried on the banks of the Seine, amid the French people he loved so well. He died on May 5th, 1821. Today, he lies in state at the military church Les Invalides in Paris, a fitting tribute to an extraordinary man. He rose from obscurity to become perhaps the greatest military genius of all time. He was Napoleon Bonaparte.
Don't go away. Questions, activities, and resources for Napoleon are coming right up. Now that you've seen Napoleon, talk about this. A goal of the French Revolution was to end monarchy and introduce democratic rule to France. Why then was Napoleon accepted as the sole leader of France twice in the wake of the revolution? What was it about Napoleon that made him an attractive leader to post-revolutionary France? Now try this. Research the Napoleonic Code, its goals, and its lasting impact. Compare it to other legal codes you have learned about. Then, write your own legal and ethical code for your school. Log on to discoveryschool.com for curriculum materials and resources to support Napoleon. To learn more, Assignment Discovery suggests Napoleon Bonaparte by Alan Shaw.